So, so kind of while we're still, before we kind of move to talking a little bit more about Vipassana, um, maybe we can still stay in the shamatha world with Bay's question. Sorry, Bay, I know you're doing something. Do you want to ask it again to remind us what your question was? I know it had for me, it had a few parts to it, so that's why I left it for after lunch. Yeah, me too. It was clarity, vividness.
Yeah, let me. I think it. Yeah, it's almost like two-part because I was curious about your instruction when you um, because yesterday I asked about the gaze and then you said kind of relax the gaze.
Mhm.
And I think at some part in the instruction that I understand is to just have like a clear perception, like clear vision and not like blurry.
Mhm.
And then there's also the part where I think you mentioned like let's say we get sleepy, then we tighten that by um, having more vivid like
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
clarity.
Yeah.
So I think it's just might be like the terminologies, like what does it mean, the vivid, the clarity, because also these are used in the text as well. And like, just this part say non-obstructing, lucid, clear, unobstructed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And but I'm not sure if I find the right text, but there's part of the text that you refer to this morning that's related to the clear and vivid.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to make sure I understand um, how that's related to the actual perception, like like clear, like when things are in focus or
Mhm,
out of
mhm.
focus.
Yeah.
Because my understanding, the text when it talks about clear and vivid, it's about that the awareness is clear and vivid.
Mm,
Or
yeah, that's
okay,
what.
I
Yeah,
could
so
misunderstand.
so
So if
there's
you
a
could
couple of things.
clarify.
So basically the senses are just left natural. Um and I guess we could say like natural in the senses it's not so much like sharp, it's just there. So it's not necessarily clear or unclear. It's like when you hear a sound, you just hear a sound, right? If you have earplugs in, we could say somewhat it's not so clear because there's earplugs obstructing it. So in a sense, it's sort of like we just leave the eyes like we leave the ears, just natural. Where ears can hear sound, eyes can see things, right? So that's kind of the way we leave the eyes. And then, of course, because we're not used to opening the eyes during meditation or kind of leaving them to rest in the space in front of us, sometimes we get kind of weird, blurry, or colors or things like that. And then you just refresh the eyes, like refresh the eyes. But eventually, if we persevere, the eyes just rest kind of naturally, not staring at anything in particular, just sort of rest. Like the ear, like I think the ears are a good example because we don't have to tweak our ears. We're not like, oh, I need to rest my ears now, right? We're kind of used to just leaving them like that. So we just need to get used to leaving the eyes because our eyes are kind of also a very unique gateway to the world. And they're also a kind of a gateway to developing a lot of clinging and aversion usually. Like if you kind of study your experience a little bit, you'll see like the eyes are what create the most judgment for us out of all of our physical sense perceptions. And one example I have is I was in like a 4-month retreat in the forest, and I didn't have hardly anything. There wasn't internet or anything, but I had like a shortwave radio, and I can get NPR, and then I would like on my breaks, I would listen to NPR. And I would do that, and I kind of noticed it didn't really affect my meditation so much. Like I didn't think about it, or it didn't like make me too excited. It just sort of was okay. Sometimes I would have a reaction to the news, but it was just something, the auditory wasn't that overwhelming. And then on my computer at the time, I had like one documentary and I watched it like 3 or 4 times in retreats because I just sometimes just need a break. And I remember after being in retreat for like a month or two and then watching that, it totally like overwhelmed my senses. It was just like overwhelming. Like when the first time you go to like a big movie theater and see like a 3D avatar or something, it's kind of overwhelming. That's what it felt like, but just a small computer and like a Bob Dylan documentary. So that kind of proved to me that the eyes are kind of like a more intense gateway for the body. So then in certain styles of meditation, we use them to our advantage. So if we can allow the eyes to settle, we can use them, first of all, to be able to engage with the outer world, with that gateway, with more evenness, maybe is one way to put it. Less extremes. But also, so that's like one way to think about what your question is around the gaze. And then we'll talk about vividness and clarity in a second. But also with the gaze, what's interesting with the eyes in particular, out of all the sense perceptions, they're also kind of a way to help us trigger. They're not the clarity of the mind. It's not the same thing. But they can kind of trigger us. I don't know. They can kind of help to recognize the clarity of mind. That's why I keep emphasizing open your eyes, open your eyes, open your eyes. Because what this meditation is, this type of shamatha, we're resting awareness on clarity. So eventually we need to recognize what clarity is. We call the relative nature of mind, the clear aspect of mind. We have to recognize that. And with the eyes open, it really helps, not because the eyes are the same thing, but they kind of can trigger that. They become like a condition a little bit. And when they're closed, they don't for most people. Though eventually we also don't want to be biased to, oh, I can only recognize the clarity of mind if my eyes are open. We need to be able to do that when the eyes are closed too. So it's like a skillful means to help us when we're a beginner at this kind of practice. So that's true too. And that's also why I think it's different than the ears. Like it does take some work to work with the eyes. But once we kind of are able to relax the eyes, we're not staring at anything, they're open, they're not blurry, they're not obscured. And if we wear glasses, you just wear glasses. You keep the glasses on. So it's not like we don't change anything. You just leave it as it is. So that's the eyes. The clarity aspect of mind is talking about more of like I said, the root of mind. It's not the clarity of something. It's not the clarity of how clear the mind is. It's that the mind is clear at its root. You see what I'm saying? So it's just something, like I said, as we remove more and more of the when we're able to settle more in meditation, naturally we're just going to connect with that. It's like when you're swimming in a pool, at some point you recognize I'm in the water. You see? It's like that. It's like the water of it's like the water we're swimming in. But it's subtle. And again, it's not going to liberate you. It's just a stepping stone. But it's also important because when we can rest the mind in its natural clarity, um, it's not so hard to, how do you say it? I mean, it's still tough to settle sometimes in meditation, but there's another level to this. It's like another layer, and I don't know, something else can develop. So that's the clarity aspect of the mind. Now, the vividness, I have to research a little bit more because there's different ways to think of vividness in meditation. Um, it kind of refers one way. I think it refers more to like the freshness of the practice. So again, I think it's more in relationship to dullness and excitement because the clarity aspect we can't make better or worse. It's just what it is. Of course, we can like connect with it more or less, but that has nothing to do with it being more or less. You see what I'm saying? So, but the vividness, that seems like a quality that kind of naturally comes out of resting and awareness. And I like the approach more from here. We just relax undistracted. Eventually, like there's a vividness that comes out of that itself. But like I said, sometimes we can kind of like increase the alertness a little bit, which also to me is a little bit connected to vividness. Like it's not like we make the mind brighter. It's more like there's a freshness in the practice. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like when you're settled and your body can be really tired, but the 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 mind isn't tired. See, this is like one distinction we make as meditators eventually. It's like we could be really sleepy, but can the mind get sleepy? The mind is not physical. So what gets sleepy? That's kind of an interesting thing to work with. So eventually we kind of can connect with clarity, and clarity itself is not sleepy or it's not sleepy or awake. It's just there. And so we connect with that. And there's a kind of vividness in that when we're able to arrest the awareness there. Make sense? I mean, it has to be experienced, but it has to make sense enough that you have a direction, to go.
I think it makes sense to some degree, but I have to say, because yesterday I was sleepy, that's why I found it quite difficult
Which part?
to, it's almost like trying to maintain
Yeah,
that.
yeah. The maintenance is hard when you're sleepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's more of a muscle problem.
Mm.
It's like let's say we have to carry, I don't know, like 50-pound water jugs or something in both arms, and we have to carry them a mile or a half a mile. It's like unless we've done the training to build the muscle to do that, it's going to be really difficult. But for a person who's trained their muscles, they're going to have more success at that. That's the maintenance. That's why here maintenance depends on how much we practice, how much we've trained. And trained in what? Trained in connecting to awareness, gently resting with awareness and clarity, and just doing that again and again and again and again. It's not so much about holding a state of concentration. Concentration will come out of that, actually, but it's not so much. So, in this kind of practice, we can also do in shorter periods, meaning, like, let's say we normally meditate for 30 minutes. We still meditate for 30 minutes, but maybe we do shorter 3 to 4 minute periods within that 30 minutes where we do 30 minutes of relaxing with awareness and clarity. Then we take like 10 seconds off. Then again, connect because it breaks it up and it freshens it. And that also helps with the vividness because sometimes we try to hold meditation and we just tire ourselves out because we don't have the strength to do that. It's sort of like when you're weight training, you can do like, you do reps and you're not you have an hour and you're not lifting weights for an hour. You're lifting weights for a minute or two and then you take a break. Then you do it again. You know what I mean? It's similar here. It's a different approach, oh, we lost the TV. It's a different approach, a different way to do it, but how do you say it? It's like it's kind of a little bit counterintuitive because we actually get stronger quicker. Where I find a lot of people are obsessed with sitting and trying to be focused. This is like a style. It's not wrong. Even in Buddhism we have that style. I just think this way is a little bit easier for most of us modern people, and actually the results of the practice happen sooner. I mean, depending on the person, because a lot of us we're already anxious and overwhelmed, and our nervous systems are a little bit overactive. So when we try to push that more to stay focused and concentrated, it doesn't necessarily go in the right direction. This takes advantage of like we're not distracted, we're training in awareness, but we relax with that a little bit. It's a little bit more easeful depending on the person. Yeah. So yeah, that's all three parts of what you were asking. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I think modern people, it's a little bit more. For me, it's more accessible too.
Yeah, just to repeat it seems accessible to me in that now that I have been taught, I can go there quickly, shall we say.
Sure.
And I find
Yeah.
in that to be my response already. So
Yeah, and then what I recommend is if that's happening for you, go there quickly many times. So like maybe you have a 45-minute session or a 30, whatever you normally meditate. Do it many times within that 45 minutes because your strength, it's like you're doing these reps. And take the pressure off that you need to sustain it for a long time. And then eventually it'll just sustain itself a little bit more naturally over time. But yeah, work on like shorter moments and many.
What I see it being helpful for me in the corporate world is triggers.
Mm.
When I get my triggers, I'll have an opportunity to leave the situation and then use this tool to return to center
right, yeah.
again, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And because, corporate America is really tough at times and there could be people or situations and change that happens.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for this tool.
Yeah. My job will be have completed if I can help people to make late stage capitalism more sustainable, you know? No, I'm just joking. No, I mean we need yeah. No, I'm being very sarcastic, I hope. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean this is because this is kind of one promise from this is one of the criticisms of what people have deemed McMindfulness, where it's sort of like it's not about teaching people to be more awake and to develop a kinder world. It's more like how to tolerate a system that's dysfunctional, you know? So I hope we're not doing that here. But at the same time, we do need tools for our life, you know? And the truth is we can't change we have to work with the systems that are here to some degree. We can change things that are harming people. We can try, but we can waste a lot of energy sometimes instead of learning how to navigate them in a healthy way. So no, that's good. Yeah. Well, Mara is kind of what like you want to know what Mara is? Oh, I see you're saying marketing. Well, marketing is just a tool of communication. So marketing's not so bad in and of itself. It's just sort of how you use it, you
Yeah.
know? But you mean well, generally Mara is the mind of like with your question, you know? When we really get into what Mara is the three main afflictive emotions: misperception, aversion, and clinging. That's what Mara is, actually, coming from our mind. But then, of course, Mara takes these different aspects. And so we have like four main Maras we talk about generally. But the main one is the egohood, the way we form this, like I said, dualistic reality. That's the main one Buddhism is tackling. So eventually, like I said, it goes from outer to inner. So even outer forms, we'll talk about like outer demons. It's not like they don't, it's the same as the human world. It's like, how do you say it? In the human world, we have all kinds of people. We have people with really good intentions and motivations, and people with really bad intentions. So, of course, we have other kinds of beings and things like that have the same thing. But it's like they use that sometimes as an analogy because pre-modern world has room for different kinds of beings, not just human beings, not just animals, but also spirits and things like that. So sometimes they use that as an analogy in Buddhism to also describe, how do you say it? The outer Mara happens because the inner Mara is there. And if we were to take out any kind of like, maybe some people have trouble believing in other kinds of realms we can't see, we take that out. War happens. We could call like war a kind of Mara, or something. It happens because we have the basis for war in our minds. We have aversion and clinging. So I think Buddhism, it's very beautiful because it goes back to like, it all comes back to, it's not just personal responsibility. It's like this more like, what is the actual foundation of the problems we experience? Why do they happen? Do they happen because there's evil? Not from a Buddhist perspective. Buddhism doesn't really believe in good and evil in that way, which I find refreshing personally. Because when there's good and evil, there's actually no chance to, there's no, it's incredibly bad news if someone were to prove that good and evil exists permanently. That would mean we have no hope. You see? But because Buddhism is kind of saying, maybe it doesn't exist like that. Maybe there's not good and evil. There's hope. You see? Because it means we can change. It means like the person we think is the most evil person can change. You know? Anyways. uh can I keep going on the teaching or yeah, you're okay? Okay. So, okay, let's go back to Milarepa. I'm having fun going between these two. So now, Milarepa. So Milarepa, we're at the point where he gave the teaching to Paldarbum, and she went away to practice. Like a good student. She went away. She practiced, right? And then it says here, so teaching her the key points of posture and mind, he set her to practice meditation. The girl had some fine experience and understanding. In order to clear up her uncertainty and hindrances, she sang these questions. So basically, this is a style where it's not so prevalent anymore, but this is a style where, like, a very developed realized being like Milarepa, the tradition is not giving this kind of teaching to a large group. It's done more one-to-one. That's very rare now. But this is kind of how it was done. And so, and what that meant was kind of some, how do you say it? Like a family connection, like with family, even if we struggle with them or something like that, there's some bond where we keep coming back to each other. So there's this kind of bond where she, in this case, she went away to meditate. She developed some experience, and then her responsibility was to come back and report what happened. And Milarepa's responsibility in this kind of relationship is to continue to guide her based on those experiences. So the Mahamudra tradition, originally in India and then early days in Tibet, like this, was like that, is like very spontaneous. And the teacher who's realized can kind of know if the student really had the experience or if they just had the intellectual understanding. There's a story one of my lamas told Tukusanak Rinpoche of his guru, whose name is Troshik Rinpoche, who was also a teacher of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's. And Troshik Rinpoche, he had a nunnery up kind of near where Lama Zopa was born, like the Solokhumbu region, like kind of near there. And he had a nunnery, and he went there to the nunnery to give teachings, to give instruction, kind of to do some style like what Milarepa is doing here, where he would give the teaching, the nuns would go out onto the mountain and practice, and then they would each have to come and report their experience. And it's not like a test. It's a little bit different than that. It's more like they report it, and then he could guide them further, just like what Milarepa is doing here. So each nun, so it was because it wasn't one-to-one, they had to do it in a way where the nuns would, again, modifying the tradition a little bit. But so each nun, they were kind of like lined up outside, and then each nun would go in the door, and very respectfully, Troshik Rinpoche would have like tea for them, and they would be able to talk a little bit and mostly report their experience, and then maybe Troshik Rinpoche would be able to guide them personally like that. Anyways, there's one nun who, this story was from Tukusanak Rinpoche, so I'm just, paraphrasing from what he said. There's one nun who kind of went onto the mountain. She didn't really understand the instruction. She didn't get it. She was kind of like, probably playing with grass or something most of the time, or just kind of bored, or, didn't know what to do. But she came down and lined up with the other nuns, and she was kind of afraid. She was like, I don't know what to say. I mean, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here, or I don't know what I'm supposed to say. So she was kind of spying on the conversations as much as she could, from outside the door. So apparently, how do you say it? She was kind of listening to the nun before her in what she said. So what, there's different styles in this kind of, how do you say it? Close kind of disciple teacher transmission. And so in this particular question was, so the exercise was to go onto the mountain, meditate, and look at, like, find out how is your mind. It was kind of more broad, like, how is your mind? What is your mind? And so Troshik Rinpoche asked this nun, and with this other nun who didn't get it, spying, like listening through the door, he asked the nun in front of her, So how's your mind, And she said something like mind is like the sky, kind of similar to our instructions here. And of course there can be a platitude, but I think this nun was she meant it. She actually experienced that. Mind is like uh like space or like the sky. And something like that. I got to get the word right because otherwise the story won't connect. So I think it was sky. Um, and so Trisha Grimshay was like, "Oh, good, good, yeah." And then then this nun left, and then the nun who was kind of stuck, she didn't know what to do. She goes in the room and she sits there and she's kind of fidgety and but she's thinking to herself, "Okay, this woman, this nun before me, she said mine is like a sausage because the word for Tibetan, the word in Tibetan for sausage, I think it's sky. I don't. I feel bad if I'm giving you the wrong word, but basically the word for sausage and something else like sky it is the same. And so the nun thought to herself when she heard this when she was sneaking and she heard this woman say the mind is like the sky. She heard sausage. She says sausage. That's weird, but okay, it sounds like he approves. So I'm going to say that. So she gets in there. She's a little nervous. She's fidgeting, and so Trisha Grimshay says, "So, how is your mind?" And she says, "It's like a big white sausage." Because in Tibet they have like a blood sausage, like red sausage, and then they have white sausage, like more from the fatty meat. And so she thought, "Oh, that's the better one." So I'm going to say like a white sausage. And so Trisha Grimshay kind of figured out what was going on, and he just laughed and said, "Okay, then eat it. Eat your mind." So, anyways, so this is kind of like an example of this really beautiful tradition, and yeah, so that's kind of what's happening here. So Paul Darboom approaches Milarepa to sing her both her questions but also her experience. So she says, "Please listen, precious Jetsun," which is a title for Milarepa. "Please hear me, sublime Nirmanakaya. It was easy to meditate like the sky, but I felt uneasy when training with clouds. Now, please give me advice on training with clouds. It was easy to meditate like the sun and the moon, but I felt uneasy when training with planets and stars. Now, please give me advice on training with planets and stars. It was easy to meditate like the mountain, but I felt uneasy when training with bushes and trees. Now, please give me advice on training with bushes and trees. It was easy to meditate like the ocean, but I felt uneasy when training with waves. Now, please give me advice on training with waves. It was easy to meditate with my mind, but I felt uneasy when training with thoughts. Now, please give me advice on training with thoughts." The Jetsun thought she has gained the meditation experience, and he was meaning she had gained some experience, and he was pleased. And in reply to her, he said, or he sang this song of clearing hindrances and bringing forth enhancement. "Listen here, you lay girl of Paul Darboom. Listen well, you rich and dedicated maiden. Since it was easy to meditate like the sky, the clouds are the sky's magical display. So let them be as the very state of the sky. Since it was easy to meditate like the sun and the moon, the planets and stars are the sun and moon's magical display. So let them be as the very state of the sun and moon. Since it was easy to meditate like the mountain, the bushes and trees are the mountain's magical display. So let them be as the very state of the mountain. Since it was easy to meditate like the ocean, the waves are the ocean's magical display. So let them be as the very state of the ocean. Since it was easy to meditate with your mind, the thoughts are the mind's magical display. So let them be as the very state of your mind. She practiced accordingly and established certainty in the unconditioned nature, meaning absolute truth, non-duality, the basic state of her mind. Much later, she passed on to the celestial realms in her own body and accompanied by melodious sounds, meaning she had attained realization. So, very beautiful teaching. There's a lot here. Again, this kind of teaching, what it's actually implying, I highly recommend, if this is kind of something that interests you, meeting a qualified Mahamudra master and getting transmission, as I've been saying this whole weekend, because transmission is another way of communication. From when someone has the realization, it's like their cell tower is beaming, and that can beam to your cell tower to kind of wake up. When we just read it, maybe something comes like that, but it's much stronger when we meet it in a human form. So it's important not to just intellectualize these teachings. This kind of teaching, it's meant to be received via transmission. It's another kind of communication. But anyways, just to give you some flavor, we're mainly going to be relying on a Sutrayana way to look at this. Now we're talking about the view of Vipassana, right? We have view, meditation, conduct of shamatha, of Buddhism in general, and then we have view, meditation, conduct of Vipassana, right? And again, that's probably not singular. You can look at different Vipassana practices and approach it different ways. But my point is, first we have to talk about view, and then we meditate on that view, right? Just like we've been talking about. So one way, I don't have the, how do you say it, cell tower strength to give you transmission, right? So nor would I, I'm kind of arrogant, but I'm not that arrogant. Nor would I like attempt it, you see, because I would be doing you a disservice. So instead, we need to use words, right? And this is a valid, because in Tibet, basically, we have 3 ways to connect with the view of the nature of reality, what frees us or unbinds us from samsara or pain. One is the Madhyamaka or the middle way teachings. One is Mahamudra, like kind of we're playing with here. And then another is Dzogchen. So these are the 3 main lineages of view. Now, the view is actually the view that all 3 of these are pointing to is the same, but the path we take up the mountain is a little bit different. And the path of Madhyamaka relies a little bit more on an understanding through reasoning and then analysis, right? So one example of where Madhyamaka comes from, it's more or less, it translates as middle way. And this is I guess you could say, Nagarjuna was one of the major influencers of the middle way tradition, where he, based on what are called the Prajnaparamita Sutras of the Buddha, he elucidated on those and made those more accessible through his commentaries, like in Sanskrit, the Mula Madhyamika Karika, which is basically the how do you say it? Like the treatise on the middle way, and then many others commented on that, and also Tibetan authors, etc. But anyways, I'm just giving you some history. Nagarjuna is kind of interesting too, because Advaita Vedanta, which is non-Buddhist, another Indic kind of philosophy, he also is considered one of the fathers of Advaita Vedanta. So there's, I think it's Mahavira. There's another saint named Mahavira, and so Mahavira and Nagarjuna, both modern day Advaita Vedanta relies kind of on them. But Nagarjuna was a Buddhist monk at Nalanda Monastery near Bodh Gaya, and he just incredible. So we base a lot of the ways we work with the middle way, with the Prajnaparamita Sutras, based on Nagarjuna's commentaries and writing. And it's an approach of first understanding through the thinking mind. So for a lot of us who are obsessed with being rational, it's actually a good approach, because it kind of fits our habit. And so it helps our rational mind to be like, okay, I accept that, and then we can go into less rational approaches, like actual genuine Mahamudra, where your transmission is the basis. It's less rational, Same with Dzogchen. But anyways, so middle way teachings, middle here means, it doesn't mean a compromise. Like some people will kind of maybe misunderstand it that way, that, oh, it's a compromise. It's not too extreme. No. Middle here means the middle beyond 2 extremes. So what it actually means is, again, we keep landing in this in our conversations over the weekend. It's like, it's this other option. It's this other thing, So middle here means the middle that's beyond the extreme of existence and also the extreme of non-existence. This is another way to talk about duality. We talked a little bit about subject-object, black and white, those kinds of things. But I think this gets very clear. The main duality that the Buddha warned against and tries to get us to come out of is these extremes of being so obsessed with how we think things exist, which is a way to live in a very non-fluid way. It's very solidified. It's very stuck, right? And that's something for us to explore. We have to explore through meditation and learning. But the other way is like also non-existence is also non-fluid. Nihilism, otherwise nihilism. You know, some kind of thing of like, okay, we think these teachings on shunyata and emptiness and all of this are pointing to some sort of non-existence. So the Buddha was careful. This isn't also about being non-existent. But see, right away, when we start to talk like this other thing, this middle that's beyond the extreme of existence and non-existence, our conceptual mind can't really handle it so much, right? Because what is that? What is something that simultaneously doesn't exist and not exist? You see what I'm saying? So I think this is one of the ways we start to play with, in the middle way teachings, we start to play with reasoning to point at what non-duality is. I'm just now describing the view. The practice would be the reasoning in a certain way. Although in this text, he doesn't use reasoning when we meditate, but he uses reasoning when we describe it, which I'll read in a minute. So we'll kind of meditate a little bit more from some of these verses from Milarepa. We'll try that a little bit. But anyways, so for example, so in the beginning of our day, yesterday and today, we've been reading the Heart Sutra. That's actually one of the smaller Prajnaparamita sutras. And so it's a direct teaching. It's not expedient, it's not a provisional. It's not like the Buddha's hiding something there. He's directly talking to us and saying, this is how reality is, right? No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no mind, no body, etc., right? No attainment, no not attainment. The essence of the Heart Sutra really comes in the verse, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. That's a big teaching there. We could spend the whole weekend just on that, right? But again, this is first talking to these two extremes of existence and non-existence. First, we need to be pointed out that our view of things being fixed and real as they appear to us is not true. That's form as emptiness. Emptiness not as nothingness. It's not nothingness. Emptiness as interdependence. That when we apply some of the logic from this tradition to our experience, our thoughts, our emotions, our way we're perceiving reality, we can see things are much more open dimensional than closed, right? And we can see this on an everyday basis. It doesn't take necessarily a religious attitude. For instance, we can see there's many opinions on like, what's the best coffee in, Campbell or Los Gatos or Cupertino, right? I got today I upgraded from Starbucks to Phil's Coffee, it's proper Bay Area experience. But some people might disagree. They might say, no, Starbucks is my upgrade, right? So again, we're talking preference here, but we're also talking truth. What is true? Which coffee is better, So of course we have relativity here. That's implied a little bit, but it's a little bit deeper than just relativity. So that's the first thing. Form is emptiness. We have to kind of explore and open up our own rigidity about who we think we are and what we think the world is. We have to open that up, and we do that through some teachings here. Then emptiness is form, which is saying, wait, like it's not that then everything's just nothing and goopy and not specific, all of that. No, it also is interdependent, so it can function, and paper can be paper, but also paper is just a label for a lot of parts coming together. That's the form is emptiness part. So in Buddhism, through this, we learn to hold that paradox. So non-duality in the middle way tradition, it's a paradox. And when we learn to inhabit that paradox in meditation, we become free. Okay, so some of you are not going to understand this, but it's just sort of an introduction to these kinds of things. It's immediately, it sounds a little nonsensical when you hear the words, But when you take it deeper and reflect on it and meditate on it, it starts to click. So that's why I keep talking about it's this other thing we need to look at. Because again, like I said yesterday, the status quo of how we work with our thoughts and emotions, first we have to get sick of that. That's the kind of Buddha's first teaching, right? That's the first grade, right? And in a good way. I don't mean to demean it at all. I'm still working on first grade, by the way. I'm still in below preschool, just to be clear, not claiming anything high. But we have to know what it is. And that's looking at our samsaric experience, looking at life for what it is, not trying to sugarcoat it, not trying to make it worse than it is, just look at it for what it is. And we do that in meditation through looking at dukkha, right? As I was describing before lunch. That needs to happen before this, to some degree, before emptiness makes sense, right? Before the non-duality makes sense. We're looking at the experience, but also through looking at the experience, we also begin to see what these teachings are talking about. We begin to see there's another option, but we first have to crave that other option. That's why I'm saying it's necessary to reflect on dukkha. We have to kind of be a little bit skeptical of the status quo, right? And then we can start to look at another option. Okay, so the Panchen Lama here, he goes on to say, we're in the section recognizing the ultimate reality of the mind, which, by the way, Milarepa is exactly that's what he's talking about when he gives the answer to her. That's what he's talking about. So it says here, it's a little bit long, but I'll read it and then I'll focus on kind of like maybe one or two areas. As for the way to introduce the reality of the mind, I will record the oral instructions of my root guru. He is the pristine wisdom of all the Buddhas, who assumed the aspect of a saffron robe monk and removed the darkness of my confused mind. But from within that very state of earlier equipoise, meaning meditation, investigate intelligently with subtle awareness the essence of the individual who is meditating, just like a small fish that moves in lucid waters without causing any disturbance. So we'll come back to that when we practice. That's the meditation. Now the view. Arya Nagarjuna himself stated in the Precious Garland, the individual is not earth, is not water, is not fire, is not wind, is not space, is not awareness. It is not all of these. Yet what individual is there other than these? Again, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. If you know how to look, you can see this here. Just as the individual is not real because it is composed of the 6 elements, likewise the elements themselves are not real because they are themselves composite. When having investigated according to his statement, you find not even an atom of the equipoise in the practitioner who enters equipoise. Sustain a space-like equipoise single-pointedly and without distractions. More meditation advice. Moreover, from within the state of equipoise, various objects appear and proliferate in this non-obstructing vacuity that is not established as material. Recognize this non-obstructing continuum, the mind that engages continuously as clear and knowing. The conceiving mind appears to not rely on anything else, and as for the objects it apprehends, Protector Shantideva has stated in his guide to Bodhisattva's way of life, what is called a continuum or a collection is false. In the same way as are a mala, an army, and so on. Relying on scriptures and logic enters single-pointed equipoise in the state where things do not exist in the way they appear. In brief, as my spiritual teacher Sangye Yeshe, who understood everything in accordance with reality, said, when you fully understand that whatever dawns in your mind is apprehended conceptually, the sphere of ultimate reality will dawn without your needing to rely on anything else. Once you place your mind in the knowledge of that dawning, dwell on it in single-pointed equipoise. How amazing. Similar to this statement, Padampa Sangye also stated, people of Dingri make the lance of awareness twirl within the empty state. The view is unimpeded and unobstructed. These instructions converge in the same point. Okay, so a lot of Buddhist jargon, right? Like I said, yeah, yeah. Don't worry. Like I said, we're not going to go too deep into this because this requires more kind of detailed teaching, right? I encourage you though to like I said, Lama Yeshe has a really good book on this, and also even more detailed, Choden Rinpoche has a good book. And also, I've taught this before, and I have some recordings if you really want it. But I would I would rely on that book before me, for sure. Anyways, there is a point here. Relying on scriptures and logic, enter single-pointed equipoise in the state where things do not exist in the way they appear. So obviously, like, first off, what that's recommending is, in order to like understand the view, you understand here we're in the view part. We're just trying to understand, what are we aiming at, right? Like, just as we've been talking about this weekend. But now we're aiming at the absolute or ultimate truth, at what actually frees us from that fundamental confusion that binds the mind. And in order to do that, in this kind of Ganden oral tradition of Madhyamaka, it presupposes that we have some pretty good understanding of non-duality or emptiness, just intellectually, conceptually. So, in the monasteries, this is why they spend a lot of time debating and going into a lot of detail on this. But even as a lay householder, we should put some effort into understanding emptiness. We can take some courses on it. We can study, texts like that are based on Nagarjuna's writings. We can go deeply, and often that needs a teacher because it's complex philosophy. It's complex philosophical material, and it's hard. I mean, it's challenging. It's a lot of new words and new perspectives. But if we persevere, it's helpful. So that's mainly how he's basing it, because this is like I said, this is based on the sutras. It's not based on the tantric style, either through yogic techniques, which is, we use yogic techniques and tantra to realize emptiness. We also use this style, which is more like pith instruction or direct transmission. But in that case, the guru has to be very realized. They can't just be a random person, or someone you like. Really, we have to be careful with that. So, anyways, what's safe, is to first study emptiness to get some understanding of it. And so that's what he's implying there. But then this sentence, enter single-pointed equipoise, which means enter meditation in the state where things do not exist in the way they appear. So this is another way to look at non-duality, right? So we talked about existence, and we didn't really talk about how to disprove that. We don't have so much time, so I'm not going to go into that. So first, we need to kind of harm our concept in existence. That's the first stage of this kind of work. We need to question that. But then we also have to question non-existence, right? Most of us, we cling a little bit more to existence than non-existence. So that's why we start with existence. But also, we don't want to go into the duality of non-existence either. Because as soon as you have existence, you have the opposite, or the duality of non-existence. As soon as you have non-existence, you have existence. Again, this third option, that's neither. That's what we're aiming at. But what is that? Obviously, it's an experience. It's something we need to develop in meditation. We call it emptiness or shunyata. That's one way to describe it. In this text, they call it Mahamudra, the Great Seal. So I didn't define what Mahamudra means yet, but we usually call it the Great Seal. And what is that Great Seal? It's this, like the seal of a king or a queen. They have some stamp or something that when it's, it's officially, it's them, right? So Mahamudra is this seal of reality, of sealing, knowing officially it's beyond the two extremes of existence and non-existence, and it's this other third option, right? And so the only way to really know that is to meditate on it. And then we know it ourselves. And how can we know it ourselves? Because it's the nature of our mind as well. And this is essentially what Buddha nature is. It's us being able to experience that. So the combination that we have this mind that is clear and knowing, it can experience its own nature. And that's Buddha nature, when those two things come together, right? And if we don't have that, all we have is clarity or perception aimed outwards. And I guess you could say you can aim inwards too. But again, this third option is beyond outer or inner, something else. But we can develop it in meditation. Again, why? Because it's the nature of our minds. This is really important to remember. Otherwise, we could be chasing an emptiness out there, like trying to find something. Emptiness itself is not findable, but we can experience it, right? So another way I like to describe emptiness is, how do you say it? Reflecting on if things exist in the way they appear. For us people, for those of us kind of addicted to rational thinking, this is helpful. We can do this. It's not so out there. So let's take a traditional example, and then maybe we can work with some modern ones. A traditional example sometimes uses a rainbow, and I think it's a really good one. It's an easier one to work with. So, what is a rainbow, right? A rainbow is kind of a trick. It's a type of illusion where when the water, in the sky is a certain way, when there's moisture, when there's light hitting it in a certain way, maybe refracting off other elements in the sky or clouds. And then, of course, most importantly, when there's a perceiver kind of aimed in the right direction, right, then this phenomena of rainbow appears. But as we just described it, it's also arising based on many different conditions and parts. We would call that interdependence. So this is probably not just for beginners in emptiness. I think for most of us, interdependence or pratitya samutpada is probably one of the best teachings to reflect on when we're beginning to meditate on emptiness. So pratitya samutpada is this teaching that nothing kind of relies on itself to exist. It exists in dependence upon many things. Like I'm describing, a rainbow isn't just a rainbow, it's many things coming together, including the perceiver. And so what we can do when we reflect on that in deeper and deeper ways, we can see, oh, well, what is actually the rainbow? Is it the moisture? Is it the light refracting on the moisture? Is it the perceiver? We can't kind of, if we go really deep in this exploration or analytical meditation, we can't really find a place where we could say, that's the rainbow, right? I mean, you have to do this work. But once you do, you see, you can't really find that. But at the same time, does the rainbow disappear? No, it still appears. So this is another way to work with emptiness and interdependence, where we're looking at a phenomena like a rainbow, we're analyzing it. What are we analyzing it for? We're analyzing it for independence. And when we don't find the independence, we rest our mind there. That's how we generally do analytical meditation. One example. But of course, you can take this rainbow example. No, 1 second. You can take this rainbow example and apply it to anything. What isn't like that? What doesn't depend on parts? What doesn't depend on other kinds of relationships to exist? So you can see here, this starts to get us in the pocket of maybe understanding a little bit what the Buddha and Nagarjuna are pointing at, right? That we're more or less relating to appearances that are illusions, but we don't take them to be illusions. We take them too seriously, we reify them, and then we get stuck. And then guess what? Clinging and aversion are right behind to manipulate us, right? So again, now we're talking about the root of the tree. We're talking about the root of, from a Buddhist perspective, of how we get stuck. And so if we can deal with this root, we can become free. Yeah, you had a question, Lisa? If you're new to this, just listen and let go. That's what I recommend. Yeah. Like meaning let go of like trying to understand it. Just listen and let it come.
That's what happened. I just let go. I tried to stick there and I'm like, oh, could you repeat that? And I'm like, I just could gut with it. So yeah.
But something clicks, right? When you think of the rainbow.
Rainbow is an excellent example. I was listening to someone on a podcast that says everybody loves a rainbow, no matter what political background you're at. We all love rainbows. Can't we all agree on rainbows?
I don't know that I can see some people politicizing that.
To your point, though, I mean, it's all dependent, and that dependent arising is like, okay, well, the classic tree falls in the woods, no one's there to listen to it. Did it actually fall?
Uh-huh.
Kind of concept, you know? So if we're not there to see the rainbow, did it exist? So I
Yeah.
just, that's where my mind went, but I kind of, I caught up and then I started like riding the wave. But that's like, it just, whatever you just said just hit me really well. So thank you.
Sure, yeah. Anyone else? Just kind of based. I'll take a break just so that I'm not loading you down with more jargon. In this area, it's a little tricky because when we're describing the view of non-duality with words, it requires a little bit of jargon in Tibetan Buddhism. I'm trying to use less, but it's tough. Anyone? Anyone online? Just a question, because then we can stay on topic a little bit.
Yeah, and actually, this is the rainbow. So is it like, let's say there is some conflict and argument, that's a rainbow, or is that where you look at what are the ingredients that go into it,
Sure.
and then you start looking at, okay, there's three people involved, and then there is a certain situation, you're in a city, you know, they're all actors in a sense, and they all kind of give rise to this,
Sure.
whatever that argument, conflict might
Yeah.
be. Is that
Sure, yeah, you can use that as an
a-
analogy. Yeah.
or is that kind of the rainbow analogy? Would it be kind of
Well, I
similar
mean,
that
this
way?
rainbow analogy kind of applies to everything.
Right.
So then it's our job to kind of do the work of, one style is like that, where we'll kind of open our minds to the multiplicity of something. I mean, generally, there's three areas we explore to remedy our clinging: impermanence, interdependence, which I'm talking about here, and then multiplicity. So interdependence is more like, because there's relationship, where's the point where you can say, that's it, it's there? And we have this, excuse me, we have this with everything. It's like, where is this clock? I mean, most people say it's there, but where? Like, literally, which part? And then, of course, we can see when we break it down, is it in the screw? No, you say that's the screw. Oh, well, where is the screw? Which part? Oh, it's in the top. No, but that's not the screw, that's the top. So again, it's a little bit, can seem a little bit tedious, but it's actually very helpful, because we start to use our mind. This is middle way reasoning, like I said, one style of Vipassana in Tibetan Buddhism, not the most popular for modern people, because it requires a lot of thinking. But also, it actually, in my opinion, it actually requires a lot of relaxing, because we also need to be able to relax and be open. You know, relaxing not in the sense of doing nothing, relaxing in the sense of being able to bear witness and hold very large open questions without conclusions. That's what this style of analytical meditation requires. But anyways, if we do this enough, we start to transform our mind from seeing solid and fixed things to seeing relationships. And when we see relationships, just like you were alluding at, we start to, we become less fixated, right? And this isn't emptiness itself, but it's going in the right direction, in my opinion. You see? And if we take that fuller, deeper and deeper, eventually we find more fluidity, we find more freedom. Now, what this is pointing to is doing that on the level of personhood and mind, which is the deepest level, right? Like I said, if we can come to first an initial experience that the world arises from mind, our mind, like, meaning my world does not arise from your mind. I'm pretty sure on that. But my world arises from my mind. But because we're both human, we kind of share some perceptions together, like this is a microphone, this is a clock, that's the color blue. We share some things in common, which sometimes that consensus, it's fine to have the consensus, but it also creates this illusion that there's an objective blue. You see what I'm saying? But there's not. You have your own blue and I have my own blue. We're just agreeing on it. So the more we think like this, the more we work like this, it's one way to find freedom. Yeah. Okay, but I'll leave this there. This is just sort of introducing the view a little bit. But this is a big topic and requires a lot of study, and like I said, this is more like analytical style. But yeah, after a base question, we'll move more into how do we do this on the level of like non-analytical meditation? What are some other styles of how to meditate on emptiness? A little bit more what Milarepa is pointing out here. Again, you really need to receive this through transmission, but I'll give some style that I think is safe. Yeah.
Okay. I think I have question about the meaning of non-dual.
Yeah.
I think in this context, we're talking about the non-dualistic part of no extreme of existence, non-existence, right? And I'm trying to also understand the non-dualistic part of subject and object,
The non-dualistic or the dualistic?
the non-dual.
That would be
Non-
beyond subject and
Yeah,
object.
beyond subject and object. Because sometimes I hear the non-dual being thrown, and I'm not sure if there are different sub meanings of the non-dual, or they all point to the same thing. And also, since you mentioned Advaita, they talk about non-dual
Yeah, they're a
all
non-dual
the
tradition.
time. So I'm not sure how much that is overlap with the
Sure,
Advaita.
sure. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I like to say this is like not all non-dual traditions are talking about the same non-dual. I use that word because it's a little bit more I'm a little bit of a wimp, and I sometimes wimp out of using the word emptiness because it's really easy for people to misunderstand what this means because they might think it's some kind of nothingness. And so actually I feel like non-dual is a word we're hearing more and more in spiritual circles, and so it's kind of a relatable word. And then if I can describe it from the emptiness teachings of Buddhism, then we can go somewhere. But not all non-duals are the same non-duals. Right? I mean, one may argue, I guess one could argue, okay, they're all pointing at the same thing, but in Buddhism, it's not a thing. Emptiness is also empty of being empty. You see? So it gets so yeah, in my from my perspective, why they're not all the same thing is some go a certain, it's like they go a certain amount of the way, and from the Madhyamaka perspective or the middle way perspective, they're not going all the way. This also includes Buddhist views. So in at the time of the Buddha and beyond, you had many different kinds of non-dual schools, even before the Buddha appeared, many different kinds of non-dual traditions. Like and we study these, and when we study emptiness in Buddhism, we study both Buddhist schools and non-Buddhist schools on non-duality. One like the Charvaka, really interesting stuff. Like even the non-Buddhist ones, they're very developed. They're not like how do you say it? They're not Charvaka, you could say, I mean, Hinduism didn't really exist at that point, but something like Hinduism, like Vedas, Vedic traditions. They're not simple. Like it's very developed non-dual teachings. And Advaita Vedanta also. And Advaita Vedanta, I don't know much about it. I haven't studied it, but apparently Atisha Dipankara, who is like one of our lineage lamas, who came to Tibet, he said it's very difficult to discern the difference between the middle way view and Advaita Vedanta. It's not. He said they are different slightly, but we're getting into hair splitting at some point. And again, there's one quote I want to point out here before we get deeper. It's a quote from Jomgon Kongtrul Lodro Taye. He said, I always use this in this department because I think it's helpful. If two if two yogis disagree, one is not a yogi. If two scholars agree, one's not a scholar. You get it? So the nature of practice is it's not about debating. It's not about, this is how I interpret this. Then a yogi means like someone who's just working on their practice. They're not interested in debating or hair splitting. And so when two yogis meet, they just have their realization and they meet. I'm not saying that's always like that, but that's what this is pointing out. Where scholarship, you're meant to hair split. Like that's the point. So if two scholars agree, one's not a scholar, it means they're not doing their job. So I like to remember that in this department because there's room for hair splitting. And so, anyways, so yeah. So as far as like qualifying which non-dual tradition is the best, I don't know. Because also in the yogi department, A yogi could have a really high view and also be in like from another kind of non-dual school. Again, at some point, these kinds of things do become a little bit murky, though I'm a little bit hesitant to say that. Lama Tsongkhapa was very unique, the founder of the Gelug tradition, in that he was he wasn't he was interested in using the word, the power of the word to eliminate murkiness. That's one of the qualities of Lama Tsongkhapa's writings. Very beautiful. Where other yogis were okay with that. Like you read some of the dohas, like the songs of not just Milarepa, but Saraha and Tilopa and things like that. They're not always like clear, but in the moment of transmission they were clear because they're giving another kind of communication that's nonverbal. But anyways, getting to your question. So let's see. So non-dual in this sense, we can use it in different ways. One way, I'm giving many different examples already. Now we're talking from the middle way tradition. Also, I wanted to say in different Buddhist approaches, not all are the middle way. We have also like, how do you say it, different schools that they've been named different things, so we study them, and we call this tenet systems, as you know, but maybe others don't know. In the Tibetan system, so we have Vaibhashika, we have Sautantrika, Chittamatra, then you have like Svatantrika Madhyamaka, Prasangika Madhyamaka. In the Kagyu, they have Shentong Madhyamaka, right? So you have all these different hair splitting of how deep they're going into the nature of the view. So we do that not to argue, we do that to refine our understanding of emptiness and to refine the meditation. That's how we use it in the tradition. Now, also when we study schools like Charvaka or other non-Buddhist schools, that's the point. It's not to insult someone else. The point is to refine one's own view, because the non-duality is not all the same. We're all talking about non-duality, but I would say it's sort of like, it's not like one school is talking about this is non-duality and one is this. It's more like they're all talking about this. It's just how much of it are they talking about? That's how I view it. It's like a circle, like the aperture of a camera. We can open like that. We can open like that, etc. Right? I see it more like that. So everyone in Tibet is generally agreed. Mahamadhyamaka, Great Middle Way, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, those are all the aperture full open. There's nothing being hidden. The views of each of those are complete. Just different paths of practice to get there through those lineages. Anyways, so yeah, am I answering your question? Oh, now this middle way, non-duality, because that's more what your question is, right? The middle way, because it's two questions. I think I answered one, right? Or am I not talking at what you're wondering? But you want to know what non-duality is from this perspective. Yeah. Well, Mahamudra has its own language. But because he's using middle way to point the view out, I'm going to take that route. I also feel more safe there, right? Because I'm not running the risk of like ruining an opportunity for some of you. You know what I mean? So by ruining, I mean if you're going to conceptualize Mahamudra, there's a chance that I ruined it for you. Mahamudra is not meant to be conceptualized because it's transmission based. Madhyamaka, it's okay. We start with a conceptual understanding. So that's why I'm saying I feel safer there. Because to me, it's like, how do you say it? Anyway, I'm gonna stop that tangent. So we have kind of many ways it's pointing it out here, right? But the main ones I talked about were interdependence. That's a way to describe middle way non-duality. Because interdependence is wonderful because it goes both ways. One side of interdependence, it refutes existence, right? Why does it refute existence? Because everything's in relationship. So where does one finger begin and the other end? Things like that, Where does the flower begin and my body stop, or my perception, right? Things like that. And also, not just that, like parts. Like we can see, like, where is the actual flower? Is it here? Is it there? Is it there? Is it in the atoms? So that's the side where we start to open up what something is. Not to say it's non-existent, just to say it's not really findable in the way we experience it or in the way it appears. Then, but it still appears. So that's the other side of interdependence. Based on relationship, it can appear like a rainbow. So we're not refuting that it can appear. So we call that the unity of appearance and emptiness. That's another way to think of non-duality here. Interdependence, the unity of appearance and emptiness. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Many ways to say it. Does that make sense? But it's always like that reference of like this to that, and then the other option. That's why I keep saying this other option, this third option, that's beyond both of those. That's the middle way non-duality, which was your question, right? But of course, the words are not the middle way non-duality. The words are like the finger pointing to the moon, right? Just to be clear, the middle way non-duality has to be realized in our minds, yeah, as an experience, fresh, yeah. What do you think? Anything kind of left over from your question? I know. I mean, it's not easily understood, but that's the language, you know.
What about the subject and object?
Yeah, that's another
Non-duality.
way. Yeah. So who is the subject and object in any given situation, you know? I mean, here in the Mahamudra meditation, we're more working with like the mind as subject and the object of mind, like thoughts and things like that. So we start to see where does the mind start and the thoughts, sorry, where does the mind stop and the thoughts start? Things like that. Where is the mind even is another way to look at it. So I mean, any other kind of subject objects you're wondering? Maybe something more obvious, more gross. I mean, we have like who, I, me, and mine, and then what we perceive. So there could be like the subject, which is me experiencing the flower, right, or perceiving the flower. So in a way, it's like first of all, we can look at the subjective side and see, well, where is the me and I-ness and mine? Like, where does that even exist? Because that's also interdependent. And then also, the object itself is empty of true existence and also interdependent. And then, so of course, we just through that, we already remove subject object actually. But then it's like the appearance can still happen. That's not a problem. But then the duality between the perceiver and the perceived also starts to fall away. So that's more like an experience that has to develop. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. um okay, let's leave the view there because I thoroughly bored you to death. Joking. No, the view of emptiness is hard. It's very challenging. It's a little bit like your head kind of cracks a little bit. That means it's working, believe it or not. That means, why is it working? Because it means you're putting effort into reflecting on it. So it's good. It takes time. Anyways, Milarepa says here, since it would, all these are different analogies we can take in different ways of like mind to experience, mind to perception, mind to thoughts. Really, we can kind of go to the last one, which is probably more interesting to you. Though I really like this one of, let's use this one and then we'll go. So since it was easy to meditate like the ocean, the waves are the ocean's magical display. So let them be as the very state of the ocean. So this is kind of a very interesting example where normally we have mind and then what mind perceives, right? We have mind and thoughts. This is how we normally perceive, right? And usually we're kind of embedded in thoughts, but there's some kind of subject, getting back to your question, there's some kind of subject, our own perception, kind of getting involved in the thought, which means there's a little bit of a solidified object experientially. Now, when we use the ocean as an example, it's a good example because often they use it a lot in Mahamudra because What are the waves a part of the ocean or something different than the ocean? This is something you'll have to reflect on. So we use that as an analogy to look at mind and see, well, are thoughts mind or are they something other than mind? Right? And mind here, we're also understanding mind as, of course, the relative nature, like I said, that clarity, right? But also its nature, that it doesn't exist in an independent way. And if we can experience that in meditation, Mahamudra is mostly using meditation to experience that. Then we can also see thoughts are a part of that ocean, you know? But again, we're not using this as an intellectual exercise that has to become experiential, right? But what Milarepa is pointing out here is the waves are the ocean's magical display, right? Meaning the depth of the ocean appears so still, so, open, so, centerless and edgeless. And the waves appear so like violent, right? And intense and large and small and have all these qualities, right? That confuse us, just like thoughts confuse us, because thoughts can be rough, pleasurable, violent, joyful, big, small, how do you say it? Kind of, you know, enormous in the sense that they like overtake us. Tiny and minute in the sense like a scroll in a news feed, just at the bottom. We're barely perceptible, but there's thoughts there. So just like that, we need to recognize that thoughts are part of the mind, and we need to recognize that through meditation. That's what Milarepa is pointing out. Mahamudra, we do that directly, which we'll practice a little bit in a moment. And then it kind of comes to this last one. Since it was easy to meditate with your mind, which is referring to shamatha in general, the thoughts are the mind's magical display, so let them be as the very state of your mind. So he's using analogy to get closer and closer until he gets to the actual direct, this is it. The thoughts are the mind's magical display, so let them be as the very state of your mind, right? So we need to realize that in meditation, like I said. But in Mahamudra, if we can go directly there, why Mahamudra is kind of more direct in a way is if we can go directly there, we don't have to go through reasoning. We don't have to go through analysis. We do it directly by looking at the mind in meditation. Okay? So that's one of the differences between Middle Way and Mahamudra. But again, this text, this really precious text, it uses the Middle Way to kind of describe what we're aiming for, right? Okay. Anything before we do some meditation? Yeah. No, I mean, I think in general, I would just, like I said, I'd encourage you. Like I said, this kind of should break our brain a little bit, but don't let it break, because it breaks the brain, don't let that break you down. See if you can find a way that it breaks the brain where we're like, I want to know more. Like I keep saying, like, it should inspire us. And then there's many ways to approach this. I don't necessarily, if you're newer to this kind of like middleweight teachings, I don't recommend picking up, a translation of Nagarjuna's, text right away. Use something, maybe relatable and just getting the idea more. And then it's important we meditate. It's important. So, like I said, there's a style in middle way tradition where we use analytical or reasoning based meditation. And then, but we're going to do a little bit more Mahamudra style now, which is less based on reasoning. It's more based on looking directly at the mind. So let me go back here. He says it here. This is what we're going to work with. From within that very state of earlier equipoise, meaning shamatha, right? investigate intelligently with subtle awareness the essence of the individual who is meditating. This is what we're going to do. Just like a small fish that moves in lucid waters without causing any disturbance. Okay? What that means basically is the small fish is awareness. It's mindful awareness. Now, a small fish, when they swim, they can do it in such a way that they're kind of floating, right, in the water, but they're not creating big disturbances and movements in the water. And what this is basically saying, we don't want to disturb the shamatha. We don't want to disturb that awareness that's resting, right? But we also want to turn the awareness to look. So it's implying some kind of, I was going to use the word gentleness, but really here I would say like we have to be like suave. We have to be like smooth, you know? It's okay. Usually in the beginning, we're kind of clumsy. And when we're clumsy, we come out of awareness. But when we're smooth, we're not rushing, you know? We're not looking for a conclusion immediately. We're just looking at mind and waiting, you know? And then we do it in small doses, and that's it. So that's what we'll do a little bit. Sound good? We're going to do it right now. There's no way to sort of like, you can't intellectualize it. You just have to try it. Right? So I'll guide a meditation, and then let's see. And if you still struggle after, we'll talk more. Okay, so just take a moment in your own way to just settle in your body as we were doing before. If you want to settle in your feet or hands, the weight of the body in the seat, choose a place that helps you to kind of ground in the body and just relax there for a few minutes, meaning feel the body and be aware as you're feeling. Just very simple, very like delicate and refined. Essentially just be with the body and become aware of that. Now from here, just generating some kind of refuge in bodhicitta with me, basically, which means some sort of refugee status, that now we have some kind of understanding at least, or some kind of wish to unbind ourselves. But on that path from moving from being bound to unbinding, we're kind of a refugee. We're not interested in our previous experience, which is being lost and being bound, but we haven't really arrived in being unbound. So we take the leap of becoming a refugee. And we can include some altruism here. This mind of awakening, where we're not just pursuing that refugee path for our own sake. We're also wishing to pursue that path in order to wake up for the benefit of all beings. So just flash that in your mind and heart. So the practice is aimed in a liberative way, in a way that is also beyond our own self-cherishing. And from there, when you're ready, you can also just stay with the body for a little longer if you want. We scope out into open awareness. Awareness relaxed and undistracted. Just resting gently on this clear and knowing mind. Again, the senses open and not blocked. There's also not a center we're focusing on, but we're also not distracted or kind of like in chaos. There's something that's being rested on. Basically, just cultivate the shamatha experience of nowness for a few moments. Like we've been cultivating yesterday and today. Just let yourself be okay with how that is right now. From that space of relaxed presence, we're not distracted. But we're also not focusing on anything in particular. We're just open. We specify this aware quality of mind that can be watchful, that can observe. And just as Panchen Losang Chokyi Gyaltsen says here, with this subtle awareness that can observe and be watchful, investigate or look at the individual who is meditating. So see if you can sense how you're experiencing yourself right now. Sometimes we experience ourselves more as a physical entity, sometimes more as a abstract kind of mental entity, sometimes both. Either way, now turn the awareness to look. What this means is turn the quality of mind that can watch, that can observe, turn it to look at how you're experiencing yourself right this very moment. And just watch. Without disturbing the meditation, we just watch. We watch how we're experiencing ourselves at the moment. So this is a little bit of a slight shift of awareness, where rather than the awareness just resting with clarity and maintaining that, now we actively turn the awareness to investigate. But I'm not asking you to think. Just observe how you're experiencing yourself, the meditator. Watch that without conclusion. And take some moments to come back to just resting in shamatha without support. So we might watch the mind or watch our sense of how the self is appearing for a few minutes and then just come back to resting in nowness. Let go of the insight meditation. Just rest back in this fresh moment. So we're alternating some kind of investigation and some kind of just resting back in nowness. When you're ready, you just do that slight shift from the awareness, just simply being present with mind as it is. You turn the awareness again to observe how the self is appearing, how the meditator is appearing. And you just watch. As you're watching, if you start to have some shift of how the meditator is appearing, meaning that appearance moves from something more solid and fixed to something more interdependent, just rest your mind in that interdependence. Another way we think of this is the moment we have insight, we rest the mind in the unfindability of the one who's meditating, the meditation, etc. But of course, normally most of us just have to spend time turning the awareness with insight or turning it with this element of looking or investigation or observation and waiting with that. And again, coming back to shamatha without support, so we don't need to sort of pursue this for very long. Again, we alternate between this kind of looking, watching. We come back to just being in the moment. For the next 5 minutes, I'll just let you work with this active kind of applying vipassana or insight meditation, turning the mind to look at mind, to look at self, to watch or become watchful of self, and then just coming back to shamatha as you need. How did it go? Did you see a big white sausage? My mind feels like a sausage right now, but I didn't see a sausage.
It was challenging, but I did find I could get maybe a slight taste or flavor of sort of that shift right between the kind of the relaxed awareness and more like a little bit focused awareness of awareness. So
So the focused awareness, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by focused awareness?
um, I guess kind of trying to bring a little more attention to right to sort of that the just the more open awareness and kind of what what that was what I was experiencing there. So
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense. But
Yeah. Yeah, good. I mean, I think keep refining it, because this refinement between resting the mind, that's the open awareness part, right? But then within the open awareness, within the shamatha, we kind of, that shift you're describing, that's what I'm saying, good. And then keep working on that, because that shift is more like, for me, the only way I have a way to describe it is sort of like this. It's like, it's not like we're turned outwards when we're doing shamatha, but it's sort of like it feels like a statue sitting, kind of, for me. And then when I shift into vipassana, like you're saying, when I'm practicing that shift, it's more like a turn, right? And that turn is to sort of, it kind of activates, it's not thinking investigation. They use the word investigation here, but it's not thinking investigation. It's like the awareness itself has a quality of investigation. That's what we're developing in the process of the vipassana. The result is that we hopefully see more non-dual emptiness, but meaning, actually, not, sorry, we don't see non-dual emptiness. We see the emptiness of the meditator meditating, right? In this case. But it's the I like your statement, because you're focused on the process, which is what I always emphasize. Because some people get too stuck in the result. But what should I be experiencing? Did I get it? Did I get it? No. Too much. It's much better with the way you're thinking. Like, how did that shift happen? So see if you could refine that shift. I'm trying to think of other ways to describe it. It's sort of like, I mean, the eyes are a nice example. It's not, it's like if we're watching, it's like, if there's like I don't know why I thought of this, but like what's the worm that turns into a butterfly? A caterpillar. It's like, just imagine like you're watching a caterpillar, inch across the ground, but you have no judgment. You're just watching it, and but there's a clarity and discernment there, in the sense that you know what it's doing, and like when it moves left and when it moves right. You kind of can see all of the different movements of the legs and the colors and the relationship to the ground and all of that. That's all clear, and there's discernment, there's clarity there. In there's insight in a sense. It's not quite insight, but there's like, how do you say it? Specificity. That's the word I'm looking for. But at the same time, you're not thinking in this particular style. With middle way analysis, we use thinking, right? We use thinking, and then we rest on not finding, and we continue like that. So I think, see if you can, using my example of the caterpillar, or something that works for you, how that kind of feels, or sense that in the process of turning the mind to look at how the self is appearing. Or sometimes we look at a thought. That's another thing. Sometimes we start there. This is kind of starting at a little bit more of a difficult one, because this would be a little bit more down the road in certain Mahamudra techniques. A lot of Mahamudra, you work with asking questions towards your experience. You're not asking a question that you think out. You're asking a question that you turn to the mind to look with. And so a lot of them sometimes work with the object first. This one is going right to the subject, the self, because this is coming also out of a lot of teachings in the Gelug tradition, where we work with first kind of apprehending what's called the gakcha, the object to be refuted. And normally we do that through some reasoning and some mental gymnastics. Here we do it by actually seeing, but I'm putting this in quotes for people listening to this, seeing the object to be refuted, which is our experience of self as something solid and permanent and independent. So I don't know. I'm kind of, but you understand what I mean by the process?
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, thanks, guy.
Yeah, it takes some practice. And then the main point is that we can allow as it says here, we can allow the mind to turn to look at how we're experiencing self without disturbing the meditation. And then, of course, the text goes on to point out the view of how the self exists, right? But we need to experience that directly. And it's a little tricky because it's like, how do we know if we've experienced what these words are saying? Because we're working with something, we're working in a less conceptual way in the style. That's why I think it is useful. That's why I'm advocating this for some of you who haven't done this before, to also learn the kind of scholarly approach and more analytical meditation. I like to do both because they kind of, that helps to refine the understanding and to also gain some experience through that style, which is more like where analytical vipassana is more like you're taking two sticks and you're rubbing them together, and then you're rubbing them until they both burst into flames, and then you're resting in the exhaustion of the two sticks. That's how we practice analytical. This is a little more experiential. You're just looking, being watchful and waiting, essentially. But it kind of subsumes you. You've done analytical, and then you kind of know when the self appears as solidified, and then through seeing the self in that kind of mistaken way, it dissolves, right? Like that. Let's see if we can go a little bit more to the text. I lost the. Anyways, yeah. You get it though, yeah? Yeah, good.
I'm not sure if this is a question, but since you were talking about looking at the looker or turning to the mind, and often I have this experience of my heart sinking.
Sinking?
Yeah, more like, yeah, kind of, yeah, like falling, falling feeling. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Um,
But it's uncomfortable or
I think I'm getting used to it now. Yeah, I think at the beginning it used to be that I would try to figure out what's going on, but
okay.
now I'm getting familiar with that, oh, okay, it happened.
That could just be energy movement. So
Mm,
then just let it be,
mhm,
you know? Sometimes, because when we meditate in these styles, shamatha vipassana like this, also like we're kind of unwinding. So then energy that's normally like this can also unwind. And so there can be lots of movement. Some people experience different kinds of meditation experiences. Some like energy movement is more prevalent. For others, how do you say it? Like there's more like clarity, kind of like, or a lack of, like more sharpness or a lack of. For some, there can be more like bliss-like experiences. And there's also, there are correlates which are not so pleasurable. But yeah, so there's different ones. So there's energy movement also. There's also for some people, they experience meditation experiences where it's like all thoughts sort of cease. And then they think, oh, now I've got it. No, it's just a meditation experience. Whatever it is, the general advice is like, just let the meditation experience play out, Don't focus on it too much. And yeah. Is that okay? I mean, as long as it's not too uncomfortable. Yeah. Probably things just settling, right? From the Phil's coffee.
I experienced pleasant feelings, which was new to me for meditation. where I tried to compare an experience I had many years ago where I was able to see my thoughts from a objective point of view, but I was so busy at that moment previously, had so many thoughts I was able to watch them. Here I had very few thoughts, which I was like relieved for because I'm so bogged down usually.
Mhm.
So I think between these 2 days, I've been able to settle down clearer. And I did experience the positive bliss, which is a godsend, really, just to have that relief
Mhm.
from all the thinking. So I was like laughing almost. I was like, oh, this is fun. It's like control. So
Don't
it's
get
very
attached.
pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, because we all experience different meditation experiences. Not all of them are pleasant, but the pleasant ones are easy to get attached to, and we also mistake that for the purpose. That's the risk exponentially. So just let it be. Let it. You don't have to get rid of it, but don't feed it. Yeah, feed the main meditation, which is poised for trying to have insight into the nature of how the self is. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but of course, like how do you say it? It also means when those kinds of things happen, it means we're practicing. So that's always a good thing. It means we're actually meditating. But a lot of people, they crave those experiences and then they chase them, and then they also when they're gone, they think they're doing something wrong or they chase them. So don't get into that. I would recommend staying out of that, predicament for yourself. Yeah. But yeah, of course that's where I don't know. We could talk more about it. We'll leave it there. I understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, in one way, I think it's like it's nice to have those like relief because then we kind of it encourages us because we're like, oh well, this is moving in a direction that I like, but then that I like thing is tricky. And that's what I'm saying. So it's not bad, but then actually it's funny because pleasurable experiences in meditation are actually more dangerous in a way. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying. But I'm also happy for you that you're able to get some relief from, a lot of struggle or stress you're dealing with. That's a good thing. I think it's not the point of the practice. It's like let's say it's a beneficial side effect. But if we turn the side effect into the main show, that's when we get the problems. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. As long as that clicks with you. Yeah. But it's hard. I mean, we all like drugs, I mean, who doesn't like drugs? If drugs didn't cause so much like physical, they never had it down, I think we would have just all be on, mushrooms all the time, no? Sorry, I'm not all of us. I'm just joking, yeah.
Um, so to me, it felt like, you know, you said, okay, go take this chair, sit in the backyard, and you know, just watch or whatever. And I'm saying, okay, what am I looking for? Is like, I feel like what I'm hearing is, okay, once you see it, you'll know what you're looking for.
Sort of.
And because I feel like I'm, the whole, I'm sitting there kind of sitting in the backyard there, and I'm looking at everything, and I'm waiting for something to happen. And I'm just waiting, and then I hear the bell
Yeah, yeah,
tinkling.
yeah, yeah, I understand.
So that's kind
Yeah,
of
there's
what
some
I'm.
virtue to that. But I think also this approach is sort of like we can also get a little more clear through study what we're aiming to see. Like that helps sometimes too, because then it kind of depends, like because this is where the difference between transmission lineages and lineages based on the word of the Dharma are a little bit different. Because in a transmission through like I said, like someone who's a realized being, like they can spark something where we can have a taste, and then we have some kind of confidence. Oh, I something shifted. I don't know what, but something shifted. And then we don't know exactly what we're looking for, but we had a flash of something. The same thing can happen when we study the word of the Dharma, like the teachings on emptiness, like what this is describing here. But we do it through our own investigation, analytically. And then we have a little bit more like we're not aiming in the dark as much. But in general, it's also okay what you said, looking and how do you say it? We kind of have to know how to look. In this style, the style I just introduced, we're kind of refining the looking. That was more his share and question. Is like that's the challenge, is we need to refine how we're looking. Because we could also just sit and wait there forever. That could also be a danger,
And that's where I'm still kind of, that's the looking. And again, the word look, when it implies, something with your eyes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
and I don't think that's what it means. I mean, it's,
Well, I've been pretty explicit. It means look
Right.
with awareness.
yeah, exactly. Being aware of that, what we're, uh, but that's the thing is, kind of the description of what am I supposed to be looking for, right? So,
Yeah, let go of that.
and
Yeah.
okay, that
Yeah.
let go of that, but more focus on how to and where to look for that, and
Yeah, like refining the looking.
right,
And then like that's where study helps us a little bit, but
Right.
in Mahamudra also having a good guru helps a lot too. They help us to refine the looking.
right. So is it like, I mean, being aware of the presence, let's say, just being aware of the present, you hear the sound, sight, everything. And then the next step is being aware of that awareness. Is that sort of the,
It's a little bit different, but I think personally, I think just spend some time on the shamatha side is I think would be good for you, and like more what we've been doing yesterday and this morning, and then develop some stability there, and then you can start to play, and then a little bit play with sort of you're basically just turning back to look at how you're experiencing yourself, right? But without a lot of words, without a lot of thinking, just raw. And you might catch something there. You might create some kind of shift. And if you don't, then we need some help. We need some other kinds of methods. We need to accumulate merit. We need to like that's why I'm giving lots of things here. It's actually possible to just do that also through, like I said, through with a really qualified teacher and having that kind of, we call it's actually more of a devotional style, that style. It's more through blessings, which is a complicated word. The word in Tibetan is jinlab, but it kind of has a lot of implications there, but it's not a great translation, the English word blessings, but that's what we generally use. It means some kind of energy transferring. That's one style. But also, we have, like I said, study and analysis. That's also very helpful, where you can do that through, study, and it's not relying so much on that transmission. But I think developing the shamatha experience, there's plenty of work there. So maybe make that the main thing.
do you plan to give us a little bit of a taste of the analytical meditation? Or
Not today,
kind
because
of not today? Yeah, out of time, yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to do that another time. I mean, it's a whole world, and it's very helpful, But yeah, maybe another time. Yeah, good. Thanks, everyone. This has been a rich. Thanks online. Thanks, Urs and Roxy. This has been a fun journey for me. I hope what did I say? I didn't confuse you too much. you know? And yeah, just again, I think I've said it many times, just encourage you on your journeys. And as you can see, these are deep wells to explore. And so take that inspiration and bit by bit we explore it. We can't do it all at once, so we kind of explore it bit by bit, and whatever sparked you, follow that. Or if you already have kind of a regular thing going, just continue that, and you can weave in some of these things. Yeah, you're always welcome to reach out, and I'm happy to support you too. So, reach out. What else? Maybe we can dedicate the merit. Due to this virtue,
May
may I quickly become a Guru Buddha
and
and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state.
Amen.
Oh, I think just go down to the maybe it's not here. I think just go down to the bottom of 32.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri who knows reality, and just like Samantabhadra as well. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times, in order to have good conduct. Chongchu Samcho Rinpoche Maki Parnam Kyegyurchi Kyabanyam Pamya Panyam Gone Gondo Power Shu Tony Tawa Rinpoche Maki Parnam Kyegyurchi Kyabanyam Pamya Panyam Gone Gondo Power Shu Chopo Semar Rinpoche Kyaparnam Kyegyurchi Kyabanyam Pamya Panyam Gone Gondo Power Shu. So just gathering all the energy of our time together. And really, again, it's just a chance to seal it. Make sure we don't let it slip away. And we seal it here, which is a practice in and of itself, sealing it towards awakening for the benefit of all beings. So what this does is it seals it in an inexhaustible way where we don't let the energy of all of our effort here slip out until the resultant Buddhahood is attained, and we actually can benefit all beings in the fullest way possible. We just dedicate the merit towards that, as well as we can dedicate the merit to anywhere that peace is needed, anywhere that beings are struggling and overwhelmed and at a loss, broken down, not knowing what to do next. We can dedicate the merit to whatever would be most helpful for them to relieve their suffering. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you. Yeah, thanks, Bay, for organizing this and putting all the work. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, thanks.